How's it going? This is Dr. Shulman, and this is a video for English language learners, or ELLs, as it's commonly referred to as an acronym. And I always write out everything first before my acronyms, just so you get a better sense of what it means. Now, I have my specialized license in working with for teaching English for second language learners. I really want to make sure I got my license in this on top of my regular teaching license because most of my students, English was their second language, and I really wanted to figure out how to best teach them. So I'll give you some of my strategies, but I think working with this population is really important. So I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to try to explain as much as I can about this. So English language learners, and obviously this is all just in the Google Drive, but so here we go, and I'm sure it's changing. So these are the stats from when I made it. So the rise of immigration, currently 10.4% of all students K through 12 in the United States are classified as English language learners. That's a big percentage just going up. So this is the most rapidly growing student population that has 5.12 students in primary and secondary schools in the United States, while Spanish is the most common first language at approximately 70%. There's over 150 languages primarily spoken by students. Like I've had students straight from Korea. I've had students straight from Africa who spoke Swahili. It's just really hard, right? Like, because I have tons of materials for students who speak Spanish, but when I had students for all these other languages, it really pushed me. It really pushed me. So most of these things that I'm going to share are for working with Spanish students, but you can use all of these tips and tricks for students of any level. One of the best things I did was create tests in dual languages. It just showed my students, it like really helped them to understand that guess what? I respect that English isn't their forte, but if I give them a test in their language, then they could show me that they know the math. So I'll show you how I did that, and all the other things that I've used along the way. So while this trend continues, there are many strategies and techniques and activities that are put in place to best educate English language learners as they learn the content and standards and the English language in tandem. So basically, you're going to teach them math, but also English at the same time. So most, if not all, of these strategies, they're just good teaching, and they can be utilized to make any classroom instruction more effective. I feel the same thing about helping students with special needs and who are classified with disabilities. I just think it's good teaching. So this is one of the ones that I was very happy to help put together. So this one, feel free to steal it, use it. It's 18 pages long. There's a longer one, but basically it's every term, every math term I could find with the definition in Spanish, and I would just give these to students. Addition, property of equality, what does it mean, and all the definitions. Adjacent angles, angulos adjacentes, and the definitions. And it goes on. We've got algebra, expresión algebraica, and it just has all these pieces. So altitude, altura, a lot of times I'll say that fracción, decimals. I'll use it all the time. I will use suba for subtraction all the time, summa for sums. It just helps, and I'll struggle with it. And it just really helps my students to see that, yes, I'm struggling with this as well as we have, I'm learning it too, you know. I've worked a lot, so a lot of times I will use the Spanish terms as well as the English terms interchangeably to really help my students. So Angulo Central. So this is the first tool they get from me. You get this big book, it's like 18 pages long. So anytime they're struggling, they can look it up. And I think it's really useful. So there's a lot of other ones. So tessellation, mosaico. I just think it's really useful. So that's the first piece. Enjoy it. Use it with your students if you want to. The next one, a lot of times, just like, oh, I was talking about this. So in most of my lessons, you'll see that every one of these percent, por ciento, or por cien. right away, right at the top, like really trying to make it seem, this is what I was talking about, fractions. So like really trying to make it seem like every one of these words I'm trying to make comparable. All right, so this is another piece that I do. So this is a distance and midpoint lesson. It's actually pretty good. I think it came out really well. So might as well show a lot about this because distance and midpoint is definitely a piece to really show. So before students get started, they get a blank piece that says x-axis AJX, y-axis AGY. So they get this, but they have to fill in the definitions and the symbols and formula. So that's how it starts, right? So they have to give me the symbol, a formula example of whatever it is, line segments, what it is, and this is the notation, distance, the formula, Pythagorean theorem, the formula. So they have to write these down right away. Now, why is this a good lesson? Well, one, I use what does not belong, have the students move around. And then to remember the math terms, I always think about the alphabet, X before Y, horizontal before vertical, domain before range, input before output, left and right, up and down. It just really helps my students to see that all these terms specify the X and all the terms specify the Y. Show the history as usual. And then the formula is up here. And then I have it with the steps, which is really nice. Formula with the steps. Distance with the steps. Distance with the steps. Then they have to graph this all on their own. And then my challenge, I'm using open middle again. Notice that a lot of mine have these. We have history. We have challenging problems where what students have to do a lot of pieces on their own and then are really so create two pairs of coordinates on the same line using it. So basically they have to figure out creating two pairs with 3/4 as their midpoint. So they have to create two different pairs. How many more can you create? Can you use negatives and zeros as well? So really try to push them to figure out what that could be if it was the midpoint. Here's another challenge problem. So they have the integers -9 to 9 and create endpoints for the longest possible line segment with the midpoint 1, 3. This is a tough problem, really tough. Notice that the numbers aren't there. They're challenged. Here's a third challenge. Use the digits 1 to 9, one time each. Fill in the boxes to create 2 points that are equally distant from 4, -1. And here's a fourth challenge. So, and here's another bonus challenge. How many points with two integer coordinates are 5 units away from -2, 3? I'd have these around the room and they'd work on them in groups, stations. They're always moving. My students are always moving around. So that's this lesson. Feel free to steal it, but just notice how I'm always trying to make the math more accessible. All right, so and here's another way, and I have all of these terms, but I've got each one of these. If you want more of them, feel free. So this is just the geometry vocabulary, and I have English and Spanish. Notice it's the other one was like everything, but this is just broken down by unit. And notice that here I have English, English, Spanish, Spanish. So I think these came out really good. So feel free to take it, just to help students because I know how hard like definitions are. All right, and this was the lesson plan I showed before. Here's the SIOP model. So this is used basically for teaching language examples at the same time. So you could always build your lesson plan that has what? Language objectives as well as your math content objectives. Really make sure that you're figuring out ways to teach not just the content, but the language in turn, whether that's speaking, reading, or listening, or writing. Speaking, reading, listening, writing, you knock out most of those in a lesson, you're doing a good job. And we might as well see. So here's a copy of a quiz. So let's do one. Let's see if we can solve some of these. I don't know. So I download this and I actually would give this. So all my students had a chance to do this as well. And I would give them extra credit if they were an English speaking student who wanted to try the Spanish one. So I don't know. Should we try the spinner? Yeah. So my Spanish is not great. So I would make this and just put the word box over the top. All right. So it is divided into 5 sections. We want the section F. Okay. All right. So what is the probability of landing on F? I think that's what it's asking for. So we got 1/6, 1/5, 1/4, 1/3. So how am I going to do this? First thing I'm going to do is, I should draw. This is 50%. So we know it's got to be less than 50% for F. These are all less than 50%. So this is 1/3. So that's 33. That's 25. 1/5 is 20%. And 1/6 is 16.6. Or you can think about it 17%. Okay. Now, if I have 50%, right? And then I break this down here. I just want F. I can cut this one into what? I just made them all the same size, right? Did I make them all the same size as F? So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I want F over the total. Now they're all equal sizes, so it's 1/6. I might as well show a different one. I believe this is getting heads 3 times. What's the probability of getting head 3 times? So it's going to be what you want over the total. I believe it's 3 times, so that's heads. So that's 1 out of 2 times 1 out of 2 times 1 out of 2. 1 times 1 times 1 is 1. 2 times 2 times 2 is 8. All right, let's try another one. Okay. All right, so this is neither. Okay, so it's a neither one. You've got 200 students. We have 70 in one group, 120 in the other group, and 50 in both. Okay, so let's do it. And we just want, I'm pretty sure this is neither. So here we go. So I know I have a 50 here. There's 200 in the box. This piece is 70. But if this is 70, I've used 50, so that's 20. Because the whole circle has to add up to 70. If this is 120 and I use 50, 50, 70. Okay, so we want to know what's left over. So 20 plus 50 is 70. 70 plus 70 is 140. So what's left over? So if I have 200 and I've used 140, that means I have 60 left over. So this is what we want. We want 60, neither. 60 out of 200. I can cross this out. With the zeros cross out, divide both by 2. And I have 3 out of 10, which is 30%. Nice. So doing these Spanish, pretty hard, right? Yeah, so obviously you can try it yourself if you want. This is rolling a dice. What's the probability of getting a 3 or a 7? 3 or 7. Anyways, can I get 3, 1 and 2, 2 and 1? I think that's it. I think there's only 2 ways to roll the 3. Yeah. For a 7, it's going to be 1 and 6, 2 and 5, 3 and 4, 4 and 3, 5 and 2, 6 and 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So this is 2 plus 6. That's 8 out of 36. So if you want to try the rest yourself, obviously it's harder because it's Spanish, right? But you could feel what it's like to be a student if this isn't your first language, reading something like this and really figuring it out. So if you want to see more, I can struggle through the Spanish if you'd like. So, all right, let's get back into it. However, what works for you in your teaching is truly subjective. Explore list of examples and strategies for how to teach. So this is from EdWeek. They've got a list. I gave you mine, but they have 6 strategies. Picture word, inductive models, sentence framing, comprehensible input. Like, feel free to go through these if you need strategies. This is for building relationships. This is for support. I found that me just struggling through Spanish and trying to use it as much as I could really helped me build relationships with these students. Voice typing is great. Here's a good voice typing. So voice to text, and then you can have Google Translate. So I've used Otter AI a bunch. And the best thing about Otter AI is that it automatically talks while you type. I mean, it types everything you're saying. Let's just continue with Google. I don't know if I made this on this. Just gonna click continue. Maybe it works. Because I've used this, I just don't know which email. Other teaching. Can I avoid this? Individual contributor. Cool. Yeah, so here it is. Let's just make one. So if I just go to record, it should automatically work for me. So allow use of microphone. This is how fast the artificial intelligence will be able to change all of my math teaching into words. If we have more than one person talking, these will change to the different people. Now, I think there's really good things about this. It really helps students learn how to read. On top of this, it will you can have this write up be available for students, and it records it for free. So if I hit stop right here, should be able to play the whole thing back, which is nice. So I've used this before. Here's the transcript. I should be able to play it. This is how fast the artificial intelligence will be able to change all of my math teaching into words. Perfect. So isn't that quick? And it's free. You can buy a version of it, but I've always used the free version. I hope that was useful. If you've never seen it before, it's called Otter AI. I love it. I'm sure there'll be other ones that might be better, but that's really useful. All right, so what do you have to do for this assessment is you create a learning activity that teaches both mathematical content and a language acquisition objective in concert, which means at the same time. The activity should be based around a mathematical content standard. Think about what learning strategies could impart language skills. So it could be vocabulary, grammar, syntax, spelling, reading, writing, or speaking. So it could be any one of these things. I should put listening in here. I think listening is also very important. While mathematical content comprehension is gained, the activity can be at any grade level or math subject you choose. I'd like you to use APA, but if you don't, I'll survive. So choose a strategy and properly cite it if you got it from somewhere. Explain the strategy and how you're going to incorporate it. Explain how the strategy helps language acquisition. Describe how the strategy promotes subject content understanding. Describe how the strategy can be used to promote relationship building. Discuss the benefits and challenges to using the strategy. Explain the strategy can be utilized for all students or only for English language learners. Is it everybody or just for English language learners? Can the strategy promote beneficial classroom culture? And complete the above 10s for a second intro strategy. So you have to pick 2. You got to make 2 instructional strategies. Then you got to do a learning activity. So you're going to select a Common Core standard. Explain the math objectives as well as the language objectives. Describe in detail the activity, the handouts, Explain if students will be working alone as part of a group, state the learning strategies and will be explored for the activity, state the materials that will be needed, describe the formative assessment assessment, provide an exemplary response. So if you're doing an exit ticket, what should the exit ticket look like? And then you get to reflect on it. So you make two strategies. You can do one like mine, the vocabulary, right? You could do one where you're like, I'm going to translate a test, or you can be like, I'm going to do talk both type. But whatever strategies you want to use, pick two. Okay, then you make a learning activity. It could be a whole lesson or just an activity. And then here's a reflection. So, what was it like to learn about different strategies to teach English language learners? Do you feel like there are any differences between the strategies and simply good equitable teaching? What was it like to create the learning activity? They'd use past ideas and add learning acquisition strategies to develop a truly two-pronged content and language learning approach. So what does that mean? Is it just an old idea where you put stuff on top of it, or are you really being like, okay, me teaching the math content and me teaching the learning objective are really in one? How would you modify this assessment to better? Oh, so this is just how to make this better. How would you modify this assessment to better prepare teachers for working with English language learners? And what changes would you make to ensure that teachers were prepared for working with students who have difficulty with the English language? So basically, tell me how I could have done this better. And these are all of the standards you are covering by completing this. And on top of it, I will show you the rubric. So here is the rubric. This one is 15. You need two instructional strategies, 1 and 2, clear and detailed. What's the execution plan? So what strategies you're using, vocabulary list, different language tests, talk wall type. How are you going to help teach it? The learning activity, reflection, and formatting. It's much like all the other rubrics, but yeah, hopefully this one was useful. If you'd like to do it, I'm excited to see what plans you come up with. Probably a lot better than mine. And I hope you have a nice day.